And it was something I could feel slipping away at the time, right? I didn't necessarily want it to slip away because I had grown accustomed to seeing striations in my butt cheeks and veins on every inch of my body. What's up, guys? Enkiri here, and today I want to talk a little bit about being shredded. It's something that I have a little bit of personal experience with, kind of intermittently, on and off over the years, and it's also been kind of an ongoing point of discussion in the noble natty community lately, as both GVS and Alex Leonidas have recently finished up some pretty impressive cuts of their own these last few months. And with that, they've been kind of talking about their personal experiences with the process of it. And I've been following both of their progressions over the last several months as they kind of went from fluffy, or not fluffy, but not super lean to ripped, and eventually, in both their cases, peeled to the frickin' bone, right? And I found their insights on the topic to actually be pretty fascinating, and it made me want to kind of throw my hat into the ring as well, but in a little bit of a different way, right? They're kind of both bodybuilders in certain ways. GVS is kind of like he comes from a bodybuilding style almost 100% at this point. Alex is a little bit of a bodybuilding strength athlete, right? A power builder in some respects. And I am kind of different from both of them in that I am more on the performance side, right? Really, I only care about my fitness. I do not focus at all on the look of my physique, on the aesthetic of my physique. I do what I do, and the way I look just happens as a result of that. So I kind of have a little bit of a different perspective on these sorts of things from guys like them. Now, we all kind of know that extended or large caloric deficits are simply not ideal for natural lifters, right? We all kind of know that being excessively lean is simply not ideal for the natural lifter. So basically being lean beyond the point where your body is comfortably willing to hold its level of body fat without relatively extreme measures being taken to do so. And that's a point that's going to vary potentially dramatically from person to person, mind you. But the longer that you try to hold that state that your body doesn't want to be in, or if you simply force yourself to hold that state, or for an extended period of time you force yourself to hold that state, then the worse off that you're going to be, right? Because basically we know that these things are not ideal for natural lifters. They simply hamstring progress for a myriad of reasons. They reduce power and force output. They reduce energy levels until you potentially become a lethargic ball of just bleh. GVS and Alex both talked about that. They catabolize muscle tissue. They screw with hormone levels, which causes a bunch of other issues and more stuff beyond that. In fact, back in the day, me and this friend of mine would race. We'd foot race all the freaking time. I'm talking like a weekly basis to see who was faster, right? And I would beat this kid by 2 or 3 steps literally every single time that we raced. But once, in my misguided youth, I decided to embark on a cutting phase. Even though I was always naturally pretty lean, I decided to cut because I was 20 years old. Whatever. Anyway, I was in a caloric deficit for however fucking long that I was, a few weeks, maybe a couple months. I don't remember how long it had been. And one day, me and my friend went to foot race, as we often did. And this kid smoked me, man. He smoked me over and over and over again that day. And I got so pissed that I abandoned the stupid cut completely. That night, I started eating like a fucking human being again, and I kicked his ass like a week or two later. That's just how it be sometimes. The point being, cutting fucking sucks. Anyway, though, getting a little bit sidetracked there, but basically Alex and GVS have been detailing their experiences with being shredded lately. And I think that this has been a good service to the community because while I personally don't understand the desire to achieve the level of leanness that either of them have achieved, nor do I understand the desire to do so by the means that they have chosen to do so. That is, the way I see it is, it's kind of one thing to train really hard and eat right and just be a relatively lean human being, right? I have done that myself. it's quite another thing altogether to actually force yourself into starvation mode in order to achieve that process. You're going to end up leaner, right, than if you're just a guy who trains hard and eats right. If you're actually starving yourself, that's how you get ripped in the process. And I don't understand the desire to do that. Now, granted, I do see that both of them have something to gain by doing so. That's pretty obvious. So I hope that works out for them. But I don't understand the desire to achieve that outside of that realm. Even me being somebody in that realm, I still don't have the desire to do what they have done. All that said, I still don't think that either of them have glorified the process of doing so either. Nor do I think that they have glorified the outcome either. In fact, with Geoff, most of the posts that I saw from him when he was getting pretty deep into his cut sounded like he was just downright complaining about things at that point, which is good, right? Getting super lean, shredded, ripped, peeled, whatever, when you are not destined to be super lean is a shitty process that is probably not very good for your health and is definitely not good for your long-term gains. Now, in my own case, I don't think I ever got quite as lean as either of them, either Geoff or Alex, but at the same time, I never really set out to get shredded either. It's just something that kind of happened upon me by the way that things were going, right? I've always trained hard, and I have a decent appetite, but not an excessive one. I also fidget all the fucking time. You probably see me doing it on video, and I never really stop moving. I don't like sitting on my ass for too long. I like to walk around. I'll park my car all the way on the far end of the parking lot just so that I have to fucking walk into the store, right? So you kind of put all of those things together, and you get somebody like me who can sort of get relatively shredded just kind of by happenstance sometimes. But basically what happened was I found myself probably in the 6 to 8% body fat range. You guys can guess that one for yourselves. I don't really know. I was pretty fucking shredded at that time, and my body wanted to hold that state for somewhere around a year, right? It may have been a little bit longer than that. I don't really remember the exact specifics of everything, but it did become quite apparent to me at that time when my body did not want to hold on to that level of leanness any longer. And it was something I could feel slipping away at the time, right? I didn't necessarily want it to slip away because I had grown accustomed to seeing striations in my butt cheeks and veins on every inch of my body. Just saying. But it made me feel like a worker, you know? It made me feel like a guy who busted his ass and worked hard and got the leanness that I deserved because of it. So I had to deal with a little bit of mental anguish, we'll say, a little bit of acceptance in terms of letting that level of leanness go. But I'm not somebody who's actually about to go into starvation mode or a caloric deficit in order to maintain it. It didn't mean that much to me. Now, being that lean can also fuck with your head, though, right? Because the day-to-day visual changes when you're very shredded, when you're very lean, can be quite dramatic. When you're very lean, just a little bit of water underneath the skin in your stomach actually makes a very big difference in terms of your appearance. That is far less of a thing when you aren't quite so lean. Now, this can cause people with tendencies towards body dysmorphia, which is probably a lot of guys who lift weights, to start getting a little bit screwy inside their head, which probably becomes a slippery slope for a lot of people. Now, in retrospect, being that lean as I was, even though it wasn't a state that I forced upon myself or took any sort of extreme measures to maintain, even in spite of that, it was still a detriment to my performance. It was still something that hampered my gains. Now, I was able to jump very high at that time, right? That was when I hit my PR, lifetime PR vertical jumps. But that was simply by virtue of me being very light. I only weighed like 150 pounds and very lean. I didn't have any dead weight holding me down. And because I didn't force that state on myself, I wasn't also half starved at the time of being there. But in spite of that, I was still very small, I carried no weight on my frame, my muscles were flat, and I had lost a heck of a lot of strength, especially in the upper body. And along with that, I couldn't really build strength at that time either, right? I couldn't make gains at that time either because my body was too depleted overall. So there were definitely trade-offs to being there. But like I said, we all kind of know that that is not an ideal state for the natural lifter to be in, right? It's simply too precarious. The slope is just too slippery. But I also want to kind of analyze the social media aspect of things here today because, like I said, neither, in my opinion, neither Geoff nor Alex has glorified this process, the process of getting lean or the process of being lean. But I do think that in general, social media fitness does glorify this process, does bias this concept much more so than it should be biased, right? Even Geoff, he stated that he was starting to get way more coaching inquiries, way more book sales once he started getting peeled, once he started getting ripped versus when he was less lean. And in my opinion, that kind of falls in line with the ideal that we see all over social media, which is one that fetishizes and promotes basically year-round shreddedness or just being overly lean, more peeled, more ripped up than anybody really needs to be, right? People seem to love a good post showing off a pair of diced up washboard abs. The problem with this ideal, however, is that it is incongruent with reality. It is basically impossible for somebody who is not on various PEDs to maintain this social media ideal physique, especially year-round or even through a majority of the year, without suffering from some pretty deleterious side effects. Like I said, hormonal disruption, lack of energy, potentially lack of libido, just feeling like soggy ass in general, and forget about actually building muscle or building strength when you're depleted like this, or really improving performance by any meaningful metrics whatsoever. Never mind the fact that you also pigeonhole yourself into becoming a bit of a social pariah as well, as it's hard to go out and have fun with friends if you have to be overly anal about every single calorie that goes into your mouth. This is where the drugs come into play, though. This is where the social media fitness ideal is allowed to flourish because of the drugs. They allow social media fitness influencers to live a normal enough life if they want to. They don't have to worry about hormones and energy levels. They can be a little bit more lax with diet and they'll still be able to perform well, build muscle, build strength, and maintain that shredded physique year round. The problem, the big problem with this, however, is that this social media ideal is pushed onto the consumers of social media fitness, even though it is pretty much unattainable for them, or at least unfeasible for them to attain for any meaningful length of time, if they care about doing anything in their life other than being a frickin' hermit. When you still have to go to work every day, raise a family, maintain relationships, and you don't have the benefits of these drugs cutting you that slack and doing some of the work for you and making sure that you're still a normal functioning human being in the process, well, the process of getting shredded can get a little bit dicey. No pun intended. I guess for me, it really comes down to the simple question of why. Why the obsession with excessive leanness? Why is that what gets so much of the attention on social media fitness, even though it's not indicative of fitness at all? It's actually oftentimes the complete opposite of fitness. So why is that seemingly the ideal that so many of us are drawn to, even though it is not ideal for us at all? It's an interesting paradox, and I don't think that I know the answer to the questions that I'm asking. Personally, I think that we tend to look better in pictures and on camera when we're a bit leaner, right? But I think we actually look better and just in general more impressive in real life when we're carrying a healthy amount of body fat on us, as opposed to when we are emaciated and shredded but emaciated, whatever. I'm not saying become obese, but I am saying that when you're just like a normal, healthy, fit person, you're actually going to look better in real life, as opposed to if you're following that shredded ideal, which is probably going to just turn you into a string bean and kill all of your strength as well. Atrophy half of the muscle mass that you have worked so freaking hard to build. The trade-off really isn't worth it, in my opinion. But maybe that's really what it comes down to, right? The illusions of photography and videography is what it potentially boils down to. We live our lives through these screens, the screens of our cell phones at this point. And with that, it's probably a lot easier to get suckered into those ideals. The ideals that look really good on screen, but don't necessarily pan out as solid concepts in real life. Just a thought. I'm really just musing at this point, but I'm really not a fan of the ideals of shreddedness that I think are promoted disproportionately across social media fitness. Things that are not indicative of fitness end up being plastered everywhere as if they are the hallmark of fitness. And to me, that's backwards, and to me, that's fucking sad. I don't think that these ideals are good or helpful or healthy for most people, either from a physical or a psychological standpoint. I think they contribute to body dysmorphia in a lot of young men. I think they cause people to make poor choices that do not allow them to maximize their fitness and their health and their longevity, all from trying to live up to some largely unattainable and pointless ideal, one that is spread by a group of people who you really shouldn't be comparing yourself to, because oftentimes their physiology is not the same as your physiology. But hopefully the natural community can kind of band together now and spread the good word about how being shredded ain't all that it's cracked up to be. GVS and Alex Leonidas have kind of gotten the ball rolling for you guys, and they've done their part. They have not glorified this ideal, in my opinion. So I just want to do my part as well, right? You can still be lean and strong and muscular. You can look good and athletic, you can feel good, and you can perform well without sacrificing your health or your gains, but instead actually optimizing them, so long as you maintain a state of leanness that works with your body instead of against it.